All right, Chairman Perez, looks like we've got a number of members here. If you'd like to go ahead and get started, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Well, thanks a lot, Omar. And I see so many familiar faces. I'm so excited to see you guys in person sooner rather than later. But most importantly, I hope you guys are okay with the storm. I checked with some of the members over on the West Coast, and I think it wasn't as bad as we anticipated, but I hope the same is true for you guys, and I hope everyone's safe. If there's anything we can do for you that has to do with the storm, by all means, please don't hesitate to let me know. That's that's what we're here for. We're here to kind of help each other out and stick together. So let me know if there's anything that I can do with the storm to help you guys out. But welcome to your third day of new member orientation. I hope it's been exciting so far. I'm sure it's a lot of information, and quite frankly, if it seems like a lot of information and you're not grasping a lot of it or any of it, it's okay. I think that's normal. I think it's something that you will learn and grasp by real life experiences. And once you get to Tallahassee, whether you like it or not, it's going to come right at you pretty quick, and you're gonna learn in a more comfortable and quicker way than you would ever think is possible. But today is going to be some sort of orientation when it comes to House bill drafting. And I'm sure there are many intelligent people on this chat, but I'm telling you guys right now, I am putting my money with House bill drafting before I put them with you guys. These are the smartest of the smartest. I mean, these are the people that when you come up with your great ideas to help your communities and to help the state of Florida, these are the people that are going to help you get there. They're going to help you by drafting language and changing it from time to time, depending on what it is that you think is best for your community and best to accomplish whatever goal it is that you have set for yourself. So these are people that work very, very hard, and they don't get much credit. You know, I think when you guys pass a big bill and it eventually gets signed by the governor, us as a chamber get to celebrate that, and we get the credit for that. But the truth is, a lot of that credit wouldn't be possible without the individuals that drafted the language for us. So I hope you guys appreciate their work, as I'm sure you will, and get to know them as well as you can. As I fully expect next week when we pass the rules, we're going to be having each member the ability to have 7 bill slots, which is different than what we've had over the last couple decades. Normally it was 6, but now we're at 7. And I do want to give you guys some brief advice that I'm sure you've heard from other people, but I want to reiterate it. I think when you first get to the House, I think this is completely normal, but I think you're going to be very eager to start and eager to file your bills, which is but don't commit too early to certain legislation. I think there's something to be said about taking your time and learning and seeing what is truly important for your community and what you consider as a priority. Because there will be many great ideas that you will have, and some of them people will approach you with them. But don't commit too early. I think it's a unique mistake that many freshmen make. I'll tell you, I made it myself. So that's why I'm telling you guys. I was totally guilty of it. So I just want to make sure that any mistakes that I made that I can help you out with, I want to put it on your radar. So hopefully you guys don't make the same. But don't overcommit too early to certain legislation. Take your time. There are certain deadlines that we will go through today where you have to submit certain amount of bills into bill drafting by certain dates. And that gives bill drafting the ability to get a head start so that we just don't bombard them with 120 members and 7 bill slots the day before a filing deadline. So it's we take care of each other in the House, and that includes staff, and that includes House bill drafting. But more than anything, I wanted to introduce myself to you guys before I hop off and transfer this over to the important people like Randy and Bill that are going to be taking over today's class. But I'm Daniel Perez, for those of you that I haven't met. I will be the chair of Judiciary. I represent a part of Miami, and I see other Miami folks on here as well. But just to give you the easiest sort of comparison, if you guys are freshmen in high school or in college, I'm the equivalent of a sophomore. So I'm learning as well, guys. I think I even think when we're seniors, we're still learning because this is a process that you never stop learning if your goal is to be better every day. So if you guys ever have any questions, whatever it may be, please reach out to me. You can get my phone number from anyone. You can email me, and I'll give you my personal cell phone. But I want to make sure that you guys know that I'm excited to have you guys. I'm excited to learn with you guys. I'm excited to have you in the Florida House. This is a privilege. It's an honor. Don't take it for granted. There are not many people that have this opportunity to represent their community. So hold it with dignity, as I'm sure you guys will do. And I'm excited to see you guys next week in person and give you an elbow bump or a fist bump and eventually give you a big hug because I want to welcome you guys the right way. So Omar, Randy, and Bill, the floor is yours, but thank you guys for having me.
Thank you very much, Chairman. We really appreciate that and look forward to seeing you next week.
Sounds good. Take care, guys.
Thank you, sir. Randy, the floor is yours.
Very good. Thank you, Chairman Perez, for those kind remarks. Bill and I don't go around boasting about being the smartest people in the Capitol, but and because we're not. But thank you for those kind remarks. And representatives, welcome to the Florida House. We're glad to see you here. We wish these briefings were in person. It's a little odd doing this, me speaking to my laptop. But my name is Randy Havlicek. I'm the staff director of House Bill Drafting. With me on this briefing is my deputy staff director, Bill Welge. And as Chair Perez says, you're getting inundated with information, and it's like you're starting a brand new job. And I just want to let you guys know that House Bill Drafting, our staff here is here to serve you. We're a nonpartisan office. We serve all 120 members. Your requests that come to us to draft bills are confidential, and we only share those with other folks with your permission. So if you're going to have questions, your district staff is going to have questions. We just encourage everyone those questions to give us a call. We're here to help you, and we want you all to be successful. So this briefing today is the block of instructions is going to cover these topics: your role as a legislature, how to get an idea from an idea to a bill, what is House Bill Drafting's role in helping you be successful in drafting bills and moving it through the process. As with any type of new job, there's a certain amount of vocabulary that needs to be learned. We'll talk about all the different types of bills, and those might be some new words for you, vocabulary words to learn. We'll talk about companion bills and how to manage your legislation and help you through the process of being successful, going from filing to committee hearings to the House floor and getting it to move in the Senate as well. And finally, we're going to discuss probably some of the most important stuff that you'll need to take away from this is what are the House rules and policies regarding bill drafting submissions and deadlines, and I'm going to go through all those with you this morning. So as a legislature, I'm sure you're aware of, and you're learning, and you'll continue to learn. There's a lot of different hats that you will wear. Obviously, you now represent your districts, so constituent services is very big. Each district has approximately 175,000 constituents, so that's going to keep you and your district staff very busy. As a legislative oversight, that's not a personal role, but more as a general role for the whole legislature. When we pass bills that require the executive branch implementation, we as a legislative branch want to make sure they're doing that correctly, especially if it was your bill. I'm sure you'll want to follow up the following years to make sure the agencies or whoever is implementing your bill is doing it properly according to your intent. So you do have a legislative oversight role. Obviously, one of the main functions to come to Tallahassee is to pass bills, pass laws. So you are a lawmaker. That's going to require, researching, writing, communicating, and managing your legislation so you can pass it. Also, successful legislators obviously are problem solvers. They're consensus builders. And again, in 2 years, you get to go through the fun election process again. So you're always campaigning and working on those issues. This briefing, however, today is going to focus on that last bullet on your role as a lawmaker, and that will require you to know and understand current law. It may require some research for you or your staff. It'll require effective communication and effectively managing your legislation. We're going to talk about those things. So how do you make laws? How do you get from an idea to a bill that's passed both the House and the Senate floors, and it's gone to the governor for his signature. That can be quite a process, and I'm sure you're all familiar with the Schoolhouse Rock song, "I'm Just a Bill on Capitol Hill." I'm not going to sing that. For that, you should be thankful. But that little music video from I don't know how long ago really catches the essence of how difficult it is to pass legislation and all the work that's involved in it. Just to give you some numbers, last session, 841 bills were filed. And out of those, 205 were signed by the governor and came into law. He vetoed 5 bills. So it's not an easy task going from an idea to a law, but it can be done, and I'm going to hopefully give you some ideas of how we can help you and some pointers in doing that. So you've probably already seen it through the campaigning process, but you can get ideas for legislation from a number of sources. Town hall meetings, knocking door to door, talking to people. You probably get constituents that say, there ought to be a law. Why does this happen? We ought to prohibit that, or we ought to mandate that. There ought to be a law. So you're getting good ideas. You're probably getting some bad ideas. As Chair Perez says, you've got to sort through and be very selective in what you think is some legislation that you might want to go forward with. Other sources for ideas: interested parties, stakeholders, lobbyists, associations, senators. Senators will come to you and say, "Hey, will you put this language into House bill drafting? I've got it in Senate bill drafting. This is a good idea. I'm going to run it. Will you run it in the House side?" So you're going to get bombarded from various sources for ideas. They're going to come to you and say, "Hey, will you run this idea and put it in bill drafting, and let's get working on this as a bill." The research component of this, obviously, to make that educated decision is whether this is something you want to run with. You've got to understand what the current law is. Is there a problem? Is there a vacuum in the law that needs to be filled? We need to propose new law to fix that. You need to understand what the proposed changes are representing and what will happen. And then you get into instances of unintended consequences when you amend bills, or fiscal impacts that you might not be aware of. And with all of these, and I'll give you a couple of examples, but I want you to keep in the back of your mind, you do have a resource up here, Tallahassee staff. Not only in House bill drafting, we can help you, but the committee staff are the policy experts or the fiscal experts. So if you have an idea that someone brings to you and you think it's good, but you're not sure, go to the committee staff, talk to the staff director or the policy chief of the appropriate committee over that subject area and say, "I'm thinking about doing this. What do you think? What are the pros and cons? Do we need this?" Sometimes we get requests in bill drafting that the issue is already addressed in current law, just the way the member wants to. So we get back to the member and say, here's section such and such of Florida statutes that already addresses your issue, and they'll cancel the request. But you can be very effective if you use the committee staff as a resource. So let me just give you a couple of examples of unintended consequences. For instance, if someone comes to you and says, "Hey, we need to change," there's a condominium chapter in Chapter 718 of Florida statutes, and in Section 718.103 is a definitions section which contains 30 definitions. If someone came to you and said, "The way this condo law works, this definition is too broad. It's catching too many condos or associations. We need to narrow it down, and we need to make this change." And that change may be very good for condominiums, but what's not clear on the surface is that definition section is referenced in 3 other different chapters outside of condo law. So if the specific definition you might be amending in Chapter 718, it may affect a definition in another chapter of law that has nothing to do with condos per se. And it may be a consequence that's not good. So you got to look at all those different aspects. Another example I want to share with you, a personal example. A member came to us a while back. This was back in 2009. The Florida Department of Law Enforcement, FDLE, has had a very limited DNA database, and only very, very few felony convictions were where they would take a sample and put them in the DNA database for future references. A member came and said, if it's good enough for these few violent felonies, why isn't it good enough for all felonies? It might help us catch other criminals. And he had this idea that he wanted to expand the FDLE's DNA database. So what he did is just what I suggested. He went to committee staff and said, hey, this is my idea. You think it'll work? What are the pros? What are the cons? Who's going to like this bill? Who's going to oppose this bill? And started talking to both the policy staff and the fiscal staff. And it turned out that it would have had a huge fiscal impact to implement this all at once. FDLE would have to expand their database, their storage facilities, and everything. And committee staff reached out to FDLE, kind of got a rough fiscal impact of what it would cost. And in consulting with everyone, they came up with the idea of, what if you implemented all felony convictions, but staggered it over a certain time period? And that's what this member decided to do. Over a 10-year period, started to phase in more and more felony convictions. And when he got all that input from committee staff, he then submitted the bill request to House bill drafting. And it was very successful, and it went forward, and it worked. Now, that member could have said, I've got this great idea, let's expand it to all felony convictions, and just submit that to bill drafting as one of his bill requests. And that would have been a very easy bill for us to draft. We don't have the expertise or the time or the ability to contact agencies and do all that research that committee staff does. We're going to draft the bill exactly as you request us to draft. But had that member drafted it to implement all felony convictions in that very first year, it would have got filed. It probably would have went to a committee chair, and he or she probably would have said, we can't afford to do that, and probably would have never heard the bill, and it would have died. But this member was very successful in working with committee staff, finding a way to fix the fiscal issue on this bill. And then it came to us, we drafted it, he filed it, and it eventually passed. So that's one example of things that the committee staff can help you with, both on the policy and the fiscal side of things. I'm going to let Bill Welge, my deputy, talk about the next couple of slides on what House bill drafting role is.
Good morning. I'm going to speak a little bit about what's required for submitting a drafting request, and then also explain our internal drafting process. So all drafting requests are submitted to House bill drafting through your Legis dashboard. I'm not sure if you've had training on that yet, you and your staffs, but I'm sure that will be something that you'll all be becoming more familiar with as time goes on. I mentioned the Legis dashboard because it's important to submit your requests through that system, because often we'll get requests through email, just to the House bill drafting email, which we can't prepare a request that's submitted to us through email. Once we get those emails, we then have to contact the office and ask them to go ahead and submit it through Legis. I mentioned that mostly because it slows down the process for you if things aren't submitted to us properly. In the Legis dashboard, once you create a request, you're given the option of either providing instructions in a small box where you can type things in manually, or you can attach a Word document or PDFs or as many documents as you want to provide us with the instructions or the ideas behind your request. The more specific you can be, obviously, the better. Like Randy had mentioned, we are not the policy experts. We actually can't just come up with policy ideas on our own. We're the technical experts. So if we're given a request that seems very simple and odds are, unless we're given more direction, you're going to get a very simple bill back, which, like Randy mentioned, could have unintended consequences. So the more information you can provide us, the better. One thing to note here is that while you have the option to simply provide instructions in the instruction box, really the best thing to do would be attach a Word document with your submission. There's a few reasons for that. The first is the instructions box that you'll see in Legis is very small. It requires a lot of scrolling if you were to just type everything into that, and it would be easy for things to get missed. The other reason, and as a former drafter, I find this to be the most important reason, is that Florida legislative standards require that all new language in your bill be underlined and all deleted language in Florida statutes be stricken through. Often we will have a staff member cut and paste language into that small instructions box into the Legis request. And what happens is that box cannot contain any coding. So when the request comes into us, all we have is a lot of words that don't show, it doesn't show anything underlined or stricken through. So that leaves us in a position of not really knowing what your intent was with that language. Again, this is something I mentioned for your benefit, because once we get that request and we can't start with it, it slows down the process for you. And ultimately, we're striving to get as many requests out as quickly as possible for you. So, Randy, if you wouldn't mind if we go to the next slide. This is a very complicated looking slide, I know, but believe it or not, it's probably the simplest way of showing how a bill moves through our office once it's submitted. So once you or your staff submits the request through Legis, it follows this basic process that's on this chart. So first, the request is received by House Bill Drafting, and at this point, you'll see in your Legis dashboard, it will say it's unassigned. So the front office in our in bill drafting will look at the request and see what subject area it falls under. And at that point, they will assign it to the drafter in our office who handles that subject area. We have, I believe, 10 or 11 drafters in our office, and each one handles different subject areas. Like Randy mentioned, we are not policy experts like our committee staff, but this allows our drafters to at least have a better idea of a large but smaller area of subjects in our office. So once it's assigned to the drafter for drafting, he or she will prepare the draft in the proper bill or amendment format. They prepare the request according to our House Bill Drafting standards. They'll look for any issues that need to be brought to your attention. Things like if there are possible constitutional issues, or if it might require an adhering bill. They'll also look to see if there are duplicate requests submitted to our office. What I mean by that is sometimes we will get requests from two different sponsors to accomplish the same goal. If we see that there is more than one request that are substantially similar as to their intent, we will then reach out to both members and let them know that there is a duplicate request in the office and ask them if they would like us to share their information with the other member. Very important for you to understand that everything is confidential in our office. All of your requests to us are confidential. We cannot speak to anybody outside of our office about your request unless you give us permission first. That even goes to who has submitted what request on what ideas. So we will not release your information to any other member unless they also agree to submit or to provide their information to you. So if one member says, no, I don't want to disclose who I am, then both requests will just move through the office without the representatives being put in contact. This obviously, letting you know about the duplicate requests benefits both you and us. On one hand, it could free up an extra bill slot for you to file another request. And on our end, it allows us to not have to prepare two different drafts for two different members. So going back to the process of preparing the draft, once the drafter has completed their draft, they send it to an editor for editing. Our editors do more than just simple proofreading. They will look at it for content and also look for many of the same issues that the drafter looked at. So the editor will review the draft prepared by the drafter, and at that point will provide suggested changes and ask the drafter any relevant questions regarding the language. Once the editor is done on their end, they send it back to the drafter. The drafter then has it for draft review. The drafter at this point has to review the draft, look at the editorial suggestions, their questions, and the drafter will make any changes he or she thinks are necessary. Once they're done with the edited document, the drafter has two choices. They can either send it back to the editor if they've made a lot of changes and they think they need another set of eyes to review all of their changes, or if they're comfortable with the draft as it's been prepared, they can send it to verification. At verification, the draft is assigned to an office verifier. It's one of our front office staff to verify the Florida statute text or Constitution text, as well as look at the document for proper formatting. That includes issues with XML tags that I'm sure as you see more and more bills, you'll become more familiar with those. So the verifier, once they're done looking at the draft, will send it to supervisor review. That is usually the last stage. At supervisor review, Randy or I will perform one last review of the draft before we release it back to you. If we have any questions or concerns regarding the draft, we also have the option at this point of sending it back to the drafter for another draft review so that any possible problems can be addressed. If Randy or I are satisfied with the draft and we think it's good to go, we will release the draft, and there's one of two ways that we can release it. If it's for a committee amendment, we will simply release the bill. If it is for a bill or for a floor amendment, we will release it for approval. So drafts for committee amendments are released and are not available for filing through our office. In the case of a committee amendment, the representative or his or her staff will send an electronic copy of that released amendment that we sent back to you to the appropriate committee or subcommittee. If it's a bill or a floor amendment, like I mentioned, it will be released for approval. At that stage, you, the requesting sponsor, can either approve the draft for filing, or if after reviewing the draft, you've realized there are some changes you'd like to be made to it, maybe we didn't hit the bullseye on it, you can submit that draft back to House Bill Drafting for a redraft. You do that through Legis. Again, you'll see on your Legis dashboard, there's the ability for you to submit redraft, and it will give you the ability to insert instructions to let us know how you would like us change it. When a redraft comes into our office, it goes through the whole process that you see on that chart in front of you, the exact same way that it did the original time. So if you're satisfied with the draft though, and it doesn't need a redraft, then you can approve it for filing. You'll do that in your Legis dashboard by selecting approved file, which then prompts our office to file the draft electronically as soon as possible. Once it's filed by our office, it receives a bill number. House bills are odd numbered and Senate bills are even numbered. And that is basically the life of a bill as it goes through our office. I realize that's a lot of steps. One of the reasons we like pointing this out to you is so that you can see that it's obviously a very time-intensive process, but also to let you see that there are, on any given bill or amendment that comes through our office, there are at least 4 sets of eyes that look at each draft. So we are taking our time and making sure that we try to get everything in there that you want. Randy, unless I missed anything, back to you.
Thanks, Bill. I just want to give some perspective and a comment first of all, though. I realize new members, y'all probably don't have your House issued laptops yet. You'll probably get those next week when you come up for org session. We're talking about Legis. You'll hear a lot about Legis. That's the software program that we use to manage all of the bill requests, the bill filing, and all that stuff. Some members are very hands-on and will will do the Legis stuff themselves. They'll submit requests. They'll hit approve file in Legis and do all that work in Legis themselves. A lot of members will delegate that to their legislative aides. If you have an experienced aide that you're bringing on to your staff, he or she's probably familiar with Legis. If you have a brand new district secretary, brand new legislative aide, they'll get training on Legis as well. We realize it's all very new, and we just encourage you to call us and ask any questions you might have regarding Legis and submitting requests. But again, just to give some perspective from the 2020 session, House bill drafting had 1,903 bill draft requests from the 120 members. That averages out to about 16 requests per member. Keep in mind, some members, for instance, like the speaker, doesn't submit any request, and some members submit far more than 16. I just want to refer you back to Chair Perez's remarks at the beginning of this presentation, and also Speaker-designate Sproul's memo a couple of days ago emphasized that it's important that members be very judicious in selecting requests to submit to bill drafting. It's very difficult to tell people no, but it's easier to tell them no at the start of the process rather than at the end of the process. And let me give you an example. You're going to have lots, as Chair Perez says, you're going to have lots of people come to you and say, will you put this idea or this language into House bill drafting? You're going to have senators do that. You're going to have lobbyists and constituents and all sorts of stakeholders. And it's easy to say yes and submit it to bill drafting, and then by the time you know it, you've got 25 requests in bill drafting, and you can only file 7 bills. And as you get closer and closer to the filing deadline, you realize, okay, I've got to whittle down 25 requests to the 7 I want to file. And I've got to tell, a lot of people no. And if you're telling them no, I'm not going to file this, 2 days before the filing deadline, that puts a lot more pressure on you and difficulty on you to say no at that point in time. But it also puts a difficulty on the person asking you, because they can't at that point find someone else to submit their request to bill drafting because those deadlines have already passed. So it will benefit you to invest the time on the front end when people come to you with requests. Do your due diligence, do the research, talk to committee staff, tell the requester, let me look into this, I'll get back to you. But get back to them fairly quick and say, yeah, I'll run with that, or no, I don't think that's an idea. I've already committed my 7 bills to other ideas. But it's easier to tell people no early on in the process, because then that lobbyist or stakeholder can go find another member to submit the request to bill drafting. Out of those 1,903 bill requests that came in, 732 of them got filed. And 588 we actually drafted and released for approval to the member, but they never did file. So we don't have a problem drafting all those bills, but just be careful of what you submit, and because we'll get you the best product we can in the time period that we have. Now, I want to talk a little bit about managing your legislative process, and companion bills play a role in that. Both the House and the Senate will rarely pass a bill if there is not a companion bill that is passed in the other chamber. I'm going on my 22nd year here, and I can count on one hand where I've seen a bill that will pass. For instance, say the House passes it, sends it to the Senate. There is no companion bill in the Senate. The Senate can take it up and pass the bill and send it to the governor. But like I say, that rarely, if ever, happens. So as you're trying to make that decision as what requests to submit and what bills to file, you also got to be thinking what's going on in the Senate, and do I have a companion bill over there? Have I talked to a senator? Will he or she run the bill for me in the Senate? when your bill has made it through the committee process on the House side and it's on the special order calendar in the House, Rule 5-17 says a companion Senate bill must be substantially similar in wording and identical as to specific intent and purpose to the House bill for which it is being substituted. So if the Senate bill comes over first, and it'll sit on our calendar until the House companion gets on the calendar as well. And then when that House bill gets on special order, and I know these are all new terms, but you'll get accustomed to them fairly quick. It has to get on special order to be put on the House floor for discussion, for debate, for amending, and for voting it out. But when that House bill gets on the special order calendar in the House, if the Senate bill is substantially the same and specific and identical in intent, there's a motion to substitute the House bill with the Senate bill. You then lay the House bill on the table, you take up the Senate bill, and you vote it out, and then it goes to the governor. So, as part of what you need to decide is who's going to run the bill in the Senate for you. Bills frequently get amended in their committee stops. So if your companion bill gets amended in the Senate, you want to look to see if you want to make similar amendments to the House bill when it's heard in House committees. And finally, you want to avoid crossing bills. You don't want to pass the House bill off the floor and send it to the Senate when the Senate has already passed their bill and sent it to the House. You don't want bills to cross. And the Rules Committee will help you to make sure that doesn't happen, but it's always something you got to consider. So you've got to figure out, okay, am I the House sponsor going to be the lead on this and we'll pass the House bill first? Or is the senator going to be the lead on this and the senator will pass their bill first? Those are all things you got to think about. Now as to the types of bills that you'll see. These are terms that you will hear and become very familiar with. General bills are just that. These are bills that impact the entire state. They probably represent 95% of the bills that we draft and the bills that you will deal with in committee and on the House floor. Local bills, contrast general bills to local bills. Local bills are designed to operate only in a specific area of the state. And the local delegation must agree to introduce the measure in their delegation meetings. The other difference between a local bill is they must be legally advertised in a newspaper of general circulation 30 days prior to filing the bill, unless the bill has a ratifying referendum and it goes to the local electors for a vote. So proof of publication is something that you've got to attach to the bill when you submit it to House bill drafting. We got to have that proof of publication before we can file a local bill. There's also claim bills. Claim bill is essentially that. Someone's got a claim against the state government or a local government. Florida has sovereign immunity laws for state government and its political subsidies. Those sovereign immunity laws say they only pay a claim up to $200,000 per person, $300,000 per incident. So, for example, if I'm driving to work here in Tallahassee and a city of Tallahassee garbage truck runs a red light, it hits me in the intersection, I have to bring a lawsuit against the city of Tallahassee. I go to court, I win a judgment of $1 million. City of Tallahassee will pay me $200,000 because they're protected by sovereign immunity laws. The only way I can get my additional $800,000 from the city is to come to a legislator and file a claim bill. And if a claim bill passes, the legislature can mandate that the city pay the additional $800,000. So those are claim bills, and within the claim bills, there's the distinction both of a general bill and a local bill. If the claim bill is against the state of Florida, for instance, one of its agencies, then that's a general bill because it comes out of state of Florida money, and that affects in theory, in all of Florida. If it's a claim bill against a city, a county, or a district, that's going to be a local bill, and then the local bill requirements kick in. Proof of publication 30 days before. You got to do the publication 30 days before and provide proof to the House bill drafting. Repealer bills are just that. They repeal or delete specific provisions of Florida statute without any substantive provision. So they come in. The significance of them I'll discuss in a future slide, but that's a repealer bill. Besides bills, we also can draft, and you'll be seeing a lot of resolutions and memorials. So just a brief definition of what these different resolutions and memorials are. First of all, we have joint resolutions. Joint resolution is a proposed amendment to the Florida Constitution. If you remember this past election, there were two amendments on the ballot that the legislature passed. They both dealt with property tax exemption issues. Those were filed as joint resolutions. A House joint resolution on this side, a Senate joint resolution on the Senate side. Concurrent resolutions exclusively address legislative matters like extension of session or the enactment of joint rules. When you come up for organization session next Tuesday, you will adopt joint rules that affect the joint committees and the interactions between the Senate and the House. That will be done in a concurrent resolution. Substantive House resolutions, they regulate the practice, procedure, and conduct of the House. For instance, the adoption of the House rules. Again, in org session next Tuesday, you will adopt the House rules, and that's done in a bill. It's called a House resolution. House resolutions also can express an opinion of the House. And let me give you an example of what we call a substantive resolution in this sense. In 2018, there were two substantive resolutions. One dealt with the public health risk created by pornography, and another one was supporting the extension of the current moratorium on the drilling in the Gulf of Mexico. We call those substantive House resolutions that are expressing the opinion of the House on a substantive issue. Contrast that with ceremonial resolutions. They express the commendation or condolences of the House regarding landmark achievements of statewide significance. For example, we've seen in the past Haitian Heritage Month, or the Holocaust Remembrance Day, or the Florida Gulf Coast University Day. These are ceremonial resolutions. They're similar to a substantive resolution, but they are ceremonial in nature. They're not kind of a substantive idea or stance on an issue. And finally, we have memorials. And memorials are an expression of the opinion of the legislature asking the federal government to do something. For example, some memorials in the past are at a memorial to Congress urging the federal government to designate drug cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. Another one urged Congress to recognize veteran suicide and fully fund suicide prevention efforts by the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. So a House memorial is simply asking the federal government to recognize or do something. Ceremonial resolutions and memorials do not go to the governor. They are legislative only, and they're passed or adopted on the House floor. Finally, I want to talk a little bit about appropriation bills, but not get too much into the weeds on this because House bill drafting doesn't do a lot other than file these. But appropriation project bills were created 4 years ago in an effort to make the budget process more transparent. House Rule 5.14 spells out the specific requirements of appropriation project bills. The main requirements are on this slide. The main thing I want to focus on here is House bill drafting files these, but the most work, and there is a deadline for this I'll talk about in a little bit, is you've got to fill out a very extensive appropriation projects bills request form that provides all the information for the local project that you want to fund. And you submit that form to appropriations staff. They will work with you on getting that in the proper form. And then appropriations staff actually drafts that bill in a template, a real simple template. And then once it's approved for file, House bill drafting will file it. Last session we filed 1,627 appropriation project bills. That last bullet on the slide, this is unique to the House. The Senate does not have appropriation project bills, so you don't have to get a Senate sponsor on these. But you have to have, in order for your project to make it into the General Appropriations Act, it has to have been in a standalone bill, and that bill had to have been heard by and successfully pass an appropriations committee. These bills won't go to the floor themselves, but in order to make it possible to get into the General Appropriations Act, it has to be filed in a bill and passed by a committee. You'll get more information on that from some briefings from appropriations staff. Okay, I want to get into the House rules and policies that affect bill drafting, affect you in your relationship with bill drafting. There is a 7-bill limit. Chair Perez says that's new. He's correct. That's new for this new term. It used to always be 6 bills. Speaker changed that to increase it to 7 bills for this time. I should point out there is no limit on the number of bills that you can submit for request. So your bill draft request, you can submit as many as you want. But again, as I talked earlier, it would be wise to be fairly judicious in what you submit and what you agree to submit. But because if you submit 25 requests, you've got to at some point decide which 7 you want to file. So there are exceptions to the 7-bill limit you see on the screen there. So that means local bills do not count against your 7-bill limit. Ceremonial House resolutions do not. That's Florida Gulf Coast University Day. That resolution does not count against your 7-bill limit. The pornography and its effect on society, that's a substantive resolution, and that will count against your 7-bill limit. The rest of these, memorial, repealer bill, claim bills, appropriation project bills, do not count against your 7-bill limit. Adhering bills, let me talk just briefly about what an adhering bill is. If you file a bill that requires an adhering bill, for instance, you might have legislation that you're creating and that needs a public records exemption. Public records exemption bills have to be done in a separate bill. So we would draft your main bill, and we would draft a second bill for the public records exemption bill. The public records exemption bill is called an adhering bill, and in that sense, it does not count against your 7-bill limit. The main legislation does. Now that can be confusing because sometimes the substantive legislation is just a public records exemption. It's not adhering to anything. In that case, a public records exemption bill does count against your 7-bill limit. If you have a House joint resolution that amends the state constitution, that joint resolution counts against your bill limit. But if there's an adhering bill to implement that joint resolution, that adhering bill would not count against your 7-bill limit. Similarly, sometimes trust fund bills adhere to main legislation, and in that case, they don't count. So those are the exceptions to the 7-bill limits. These do not count against your limits. So let's talk real quick about some deadlines. This is the important stuff you need to be aware of. There's a couple of distinctions you need to keep in mind here. there are request deadlines and there are filing deadlines. The request deadlines are set by the Speaker. The filing deadlines are established in the House rules. The second distinction is there are early file bills and there are final file bills. So your early file bills, the rules will require you to file 2 bills early, and then your other 5 bills can be filed up to the final filing deadline, which we're going to discuss now. So for the first 2 bills, there is both a request deadline and a filing deadline. So the request deadline is January 19th of 2021, and the filing deadline is January 29th. When you submit a request in Legis, there's a box on there you can check that says, I need for early file. If you check that box, we prioritize that draft because we realize it has an earlier filing deadline than everything else. So out of all the submissions you request, if you identify the 2 that you want for early file by checking that box when you submit it, you will get those bills back first. You can review them and file them before the deadline, and you're good to go. Then you can start working on your other 5 bills. So these are the dates for the first 2 bills. For the remainder 5 bills, these are the deadlines. The submission deadline is January 29th, and the final filing deadline is the first day of session at noon, which is March 2nd. So January 29th is going to be a busy day for members. That's the filing deadline for the 2 bills, and it's the submission deadline for the rest of your bills. So mark these calendars, mark these dates on your calendars. Let your legislative aide know of these dates, and there'll probably be some aide training in January or February, and we'll talk about these dates as well. But the other thing I want to point out is on a filing deadline, for instance, March 2nd at 12 noon, the filing deadline is met when the member or the aide hits approve file in Legis. So if you hit approve file at 11:59 and 59 seconds on March 2nd, that is timely filed. We may not actually file it until 1 o'clock, but you hit approve file at 11:59, it's timely. If you or your aide hits approve file at 12 noon and 1 second, it's late filed. And by rules, House bill drafting cannot file that because it was late filed. And unfortunately, that happens probably once or twice every session. So you've got to be those filing deadlines are hard and fast, and we have no discretion because they're in the House rules. A couple of other deadlines I mentioned before, appropriation project bills. There are forms that you have to complete. Those have to be submitted to the fiscal staff by February 2nd. And then they have the next month to draft those bills and get them back to you for you to hit approve file, and House bill drafting will file. The ceremonial resolutions honoring a specific day or a specific university or something of statewide significance, they have much later submission deadlines and filing deadlines. As you see on this slide, the request deadline for those is April 1st, which is the 45th day of session. And the filing deadline is April 15th, which is the 45th day of session. The submission deadline is 2 weeks before that. I should mention on ceremonial resolutions, before we can file them, the rules require that the rules chair approve any ceremonial resolution before it's filed. And they have to approve, what they're approving is that it meets the criteria established in House Rule 5. So that when you submit those, there may be some back and forth with rules that say, no, this is too controversial, this borders on substantive, we got to keep it ceremonial. You've got to meet the requirements specifically in the rules to get it approved by the rules chair, and then we can file it. Finally, the last thing that we want to discuss real quickly is tributes. Tributes are like ceremonial resolutions, but where ceremonial resolutions have statewide significance, tributes are done for the local level. And they represent only that member's interests, the expression of that member. It's not an expression of the entire House. The deadlines and policies for tributes are set by the Speaker. Tributes can be drafted by your district staff and printed out on tribute paper, and you don't even have to use bill drafting. If you want to use this, we're here. Certainly, we're happy to draft that. There is a limit of 10 draft requests per year per member. Not too many members go beyond 10, but if you start hitting 10, we'll let you know that you've reached your limit. The other on the submission policy, they have to be submitted during the interim 10 business days before you need the tribute, and during session that's 15 days. These submission deadlines are long because these tributes they take a lesser priority from a House bill drafting perspective than do bills and amendments. So tributes are something that we can draft for you, but your staff can also draft for you. And finally, on the intranet, in our house, our house intranet, there is a tab up there for bill drafting. We have our own web page on the internet where we put relevant and timely information up there. Certainly let your legislative aide know about that. There's other documents and resources there that will help answer a lot of questions. And of course, we encourage phone calls. It's better to ask. There is no stupid question. We'd rather have a call and ask a question than try to fix a mistake afterwards because no one asked. And that concludes my presentation. And unless there's any questions, I'd be happy to take those now.
Thank you, Randy. Actually, before we go to questions, just a few housekeeping items. As Randy mentioned, and during the presentation, we talked about Legis. He is correct. There will be a class on Legis on Monday at 12:30. That is when you will be receiving your computers and house equipment, and House IT staff will be on hand to show you how to log in. If you haven't already activated your official email address, they will help you with that. And then they will walk you through logging onto Legis and being able to use the program there. So I just wanted to mention that in case there was any anxiety about how to use Legis. There will be a class on Monday that goes over all of that. All of the slides are available on myfloridahouse.gov/new members. It is a tab on the regular myfloridahouse.gov site. We will be uploading these slides here shortly after the presentation, and then also recordings of each of the sessions if anybody has any questions. And I think before we go to everyone else, I think I saw that Representative McFarland had a question earlier, and I just want to make sure, Representative, that you still didn't have that question, but I wanted to give you first opportunity.
Thank you. Bill answered it perfectly. I should have just been patient.
Perfect. No problem. Does anybody else have any questions? Just either hit the tab there on the right. Oh, Representative Cheney, let me get to you there.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
My question is, can you give us an example of bills and floor amendments versus committee and subcommittee amendment?
An example of
You said there
bills?
were.
Yeah.
You said there were bills and floor amendments, as I understood, as one group, and then the other group was committee and subcommittee amendments.
Correct. So there is a distinction between obviously bills and amendments. I think in training in December, we'll go into more detail about amendments and deadlines for amendments, both on the floor and in committee. So for purposes here, the distinction is we draft committee amendments. There's certain deadlines for those. They're done through Legis. As Bill mentioned, the distinction between a committee amendment versus a floor amendment is when we release that document that we drafted. If it's a committee amendment, we release it to the members' dashboard. and you guys have it, and then you have to file it with the committee staff. If it's a floor amendment, we release it for approval in the dashboard. The member reviews it, the amendment looks good, they hit approve file, and House Bill Drafting files it to the House floor. And like I said, there's different deadlines for committees and deadlines for the floors, but that'll be discussed in a future training.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Representative. Does anybody else have any questions? Either hit the little the hand on the participation list, or just wave your hand at the camera and we will try to get to you. Not seeing anybody. All right, obviously Randy provided the phone number for House Bill Drafting, so if you have any additional questions, feel free to reach out to him. Tomorrow will be our final online new member orientation class, and it'll be on ethics and open records and public records and things of that nature. And that'll be tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern time. And we will be sending the invite to that later on today. So unless there are any other questions from anybody, that will conclude our session for today. Thank you very much, everybody.